Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. We got a very fun and very exciting Sega Saturn update for you this evening because as of yesterday, SRG 320 updated the core and it has a ton of sound fixes in it. A lot of the sound on Sega Saturn could get distorted or could clip channels or have some issues. Now that seems to be like 95% resolved. So what I'm going to do is test some of the best games on Sega Saturn and talk about the audio quality as well. Before you get too far involved, it'd be a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But one of the first games everyone asked me to retest was Panzer Dragoon Zwei. I totally understand why you would want me to retest that. It is one of the Sega Saturn's best games of all time, and I'm just testing the hits like I did in a previous video here. Last time we took a look at this game, it was running well, but it definitely had some sound issues, and it definitely had some graphical corruption here or there. Now playing through this game, it seems like 98% of the way there. This is just one of those quintessential Sega Saturn games that's absolutely so much fun to play. It holds up so well, and when people think of the Sega Saturn, Panzer Dragoon is one of the first games they think of. It's right up there with stuff like Daytona USA and Sega Rally, in my opinion, as far as popularity is concerned. Last time I tested this out, it basically seemed like a lot of the sound effects could clip the channels. They would be a little bit too loud and they could end up distorted. Now taking a look at this in its current incarnation, I can't find anything wrong with the visuals or the audio. If you see anything you don't like, leave me a comment down below, but personally, this feels like playing on real hardware in my opinion. And that is how impressive this core is getting. With this most recent sound update, a lot of the issues have been fixed. I know a lot of times I warn you guys, maybe don't wear headphones until you know the audio is working correctly. It seems like those days are over. I don't know if I'm going to take that disclaimer of don't wear headphones off quite yet because it is still just 24 hours later. But honestly, this last improvement to the core patched up so many of those sound problems. Really, I do think it's probably eliminated by this point in time. But as far as the performance of Panzer Dragoon here, again, the frame rate is great, the controls are responsive, the graphics are drawing correctly, VDP1 and VDP2 are doing their jobs, having that infinite plane and the skybox all rotating around while all of these different 3D models are drawn to the screen. And I just love this game visually as well. It's one of those titles that just aged so gracefully on the Sega Saturn, because this is the era of 3D where some things definitely look aged and some things don't. Obviously this is not modern 3D, but I think this is one of the best looking 3D games the Sega Saturn ever put up, and I still think it looks great today. And the nice thing is everything just works as intended. All of the aiming reticles, all of the effects, the dithering on the little radar scope at the top right hand corner, it is drawing exactly how I remember it. You might see a little bit of seams at the quadrilaterals there, but I do recall that from real hardware as well. And as we fly off this cliff here, you can just see how the VDPs are drawing that infinite plane. It really does look like this water or land stretches out to infinity as far as the eye can see, and that was something that the Sega Saturn was very good at. And as we drop down into the canyon here, you're going to see so many different models on screen at once, so many different effects on screen, and the frame rate is maintaining exactly as it should on real Sega Saturn hardware. This was a game that ran nicely on the Saturn. It wasn't a slideshow, and you're getting that same level of performance here in Panzer Dragoon. There really isn't anything about this test that I can find to fault it, but again, if you see anything graphically, leave me a comment down below. But this is the type of game you can just go play it now. You can see the credits scroll. You can have as much fun with this if you put the disc in your original Sega Saturn, and I keep my Saturn right next to me hooked up to my PVM at all times. This is definitely a game I've completed like 5 or 6 times in my lifetime on real hardware. Next time I can do it on MiSTer and I'll be having a great time. Now moving over to Elevator Action Returns, this is a very frequent test on Discord because it's always had audio issues. The graphics, the gameplay are basically 100% compared to original hardware, but the sound would definitely have a lot of distortions, especially in the explosions. Now, as of today, that has all been fixed up as well, and that is awesome because Taito's soundtracks are some of the best in gaming in my opinion, especially if Zuntata was involved. So having clear audio here, having all the sound effects be at the right volume without clipping out the audio channels is a big deal. Obviously, the audio issues didn't keep you from having fun with the core, but it did keep it farther away from real hardware than people would like. Now that seems to really be doing so much better. Like the last month and a half, the Sega Saturn core has taken so many fundamental steps forward, getting closer to real hardware. It has been amazing to see all the progress. And one more reminder, this is not the core that comes down with Update All, that is still the October build of last year. To get this core, you need to go over to MiSTer Discord and grab it from the unstable nightlies and just manually install it, which is as easy as dragging and dropping a file. So if you're not manually installing this core because you think it's difficult, this is a reminder right now that if you can copy a file from one folder to the other on your Windows PC, Mac or otherwise, you can install all of these test cores. But it's been great to see SRG 320 really iterate on Saturn in 2024. The progress was probably slow from October to Christmas, but it seemed like right in January the core progress started picking up, and it has just been at full speed from there. And the sound was definitely something that we would test every single new core release, because pretty much every single game that had sound audio issues was known to everybody on Discord. We would always test them with the current core. The sound audio issues have been crushed, just like that character in the elevator. And all jokes aside, if you've never played Elevator Action Returns, or if it's been a long time since you've played it, I can't recommend it enough. This isn't just a core update video about the sound, it's also a video about some of the Sega Saturn's best games. I think this is probably in the top 5 best Taito arcade games of all time, and it's one of my favorite Sega Saturn games of all time. And on the current core, it works so well, and it's probably the 12th time I've tested this in the last 18 months, and that is how long we've been doing these videos, and the core has been maturing. If the Sega Saturn core was a baby, it would be getting close to its 2-year birthday, and that's just absolutely wild to think about. One more crush in the elevator, we move on to the next game, X-Men Children of the Atom. This is a game that I can tell you right now I believe to be 100% perfect on the graphics side, on the control side, on the performance side, and most importantly on the audio side as well. And the great thing is Capcom had so many incredible ports of their arcade games to the Sega Saturn. You know you're going to have an absolute blast of a time if you're into Capcom fighting games. But right off the top, you will just see everything looks spectacular. I can't really see anything about this game that makes me think it's not doing anything other than what real arcade hardware or Sega Saturn hardware would do. And honestly, if you put MiSTer and Sega Saturn in a black box and I only held the controller, I really wouldn't be able to tell you whether I was playing the core or whether I was playing real Sega Saturn hardware. That's how impressive it is. And I know I've been mentioning the audio a lot. Go ahead and take a listen to the music in Children of the Atom and all the sound effects. I can't hear anything to my ears that sounds anything other than perfect, so listen and leave a comment about what you think.
Round 1. Fight! Viral Buster!
Sounds incredible, and remember, if it sounds a little bit different than you're used to, the Sega Saturn is outputting all of that analog audio, but on MiSTer, at least for captures, we are doing it digitally via HDMI, so there can be some slight differences in how it sounds to your ear because of the capture card and the way I capture this. If you hook it up to a PVM and get the analog audio out, that seems like it is one-to-one with real Sega Saturn hardware. And again, just talking about Children of the Atom here, the performance is dead on the money. This is such a fun arcade game, and I understand we have other ways to play it on MiSTer FPGA, but there are some different features in the Saturn version, and honestly, these are great games to test when you want to see how VDP1 and VDP2 are doing with just straight 2D effects. Obviously, this is all sprites and background layers. There's no polygons or quadrilaterals anywhere on the screen, so it is fun to do a mix and match of pure 2D and 3D games in these testing videos. And again, it's one that you guys kept asking about. It's another game that I would definitely consider to be one of the best Sega Saturn games of all time as far as the performance is concerned and as far as the fun is concerned. It's a 10 out of 10 awesome fighting game, and you could do a lot worse than playing this, that is for sure. But there's so many other fun games on the Sega Saturn we can talk about, and I think my favorite, the one that I try to convince everyone to play, is Bulk Slash. This is the English translation, which is a complete redub of the Navigator as well into English. Probably the most impressive fan project I've ever seen as far as the translation is concerned. I've played this a ton on my Sega Saturn. I own an original Japanese disc, and when the translation came out, I covered it and had an absolute blast with it. Playing it here today on the Sega Saturn, again, this just seems to be perfect. It's one of the best games on the system, it's one of the best performing games on the core, and it's one that I do like to retest. And it used to be, again, in some of the sound effects, you could get some clipping, like the audio volume was too high, it was clipping out the actual audio channels on output. Now that doesn't seem to be the case whatsoever. It's not that this sound fix is going to fix 100% of everything. It's cleaning up a lot of the audio, but I'm sure there's still a few edge cases out there that SRG 320 will patch up as he goes along with core development. But getting the audio in line today was one of the biggest things that the core needed to get done. Some games wouldn't have audio, some games would have sound effects but they would be clipping, some games would drop out the audio. That seems to be pretty much taken care of. But on a performance front of Bulk Slash as well, I love how many different 3D elements this game pushes with just your player character being a sprite. This is showing the full power of what the Sega Saturn could do in 3D when they had a good developer behind it, and it comes across so incredibly well on MiSTer FPGA. And in my opinion, with the HDMI out, the color vibrancy and overall picture looks like 1 to 2% better than if you're doing RGB on a PVM. And I would say that the Sega Saturn has the best unmodified RGB video signal out of any video game console to ever exist. This thing is perfection when you hook it up to a PVM, so getting it over on HDMI, honestly, while good, isn't that much different than analog, and that's one of the things the Sega Saturn's strengths, which is how good the video output was. But you'll see all the effects here, all of the scrolling, all of the infinite planes, the rain coming down, all of the 3D models, the heads-up display. There is nothing in this image that makes it look like the graphics are being drawn incorrectly. So let's run down a little mental checklist here. As far as the graphics are concerned, they look 100%, that's a check. Performance and frame rate wise, this is running exactly like you would expect it to on real Sega Saturn hardware. Control, it's responsive, it's able to be played easily, no issues there whatsoever. And now with all of the sound fixes and not clipping out those audio channels, I can't find a single thing to complain about Bulk Slash, except that the game does have to end, and I just wish it was twice as long. And again, because this is just a testing the hits video along with the audio improvements, this is one of those things, if you've never played it before, if you've been waiting to play it until the core hits update all with its newest version, don't wait. This is one of those hidden gem Sega Saturn games that I'm basically trying to convince anyone and their uncle to play. It is one of those things, especially now that it's in English. This is one of the best games of its generation in my opinion. I love all the graphics here, this butterfly robot enemy popping out. This is just a special game, and I think the best way to play it now is on MiSTer FPGA, because if you want to play the translation, you need to have a modern Saturn with a burnt disc, or you need to have some sort of optical disc emulator installed, and I know not everyone has that. If I had the choice to play this on MiSTer FPGA or software emulation, I would play Bulk Slash on MiSTer FPGA 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. That's how good the core is currently doing on this most recent update. A big thanks to Andy D for grabbing some of these captures as well. He's going to take the death here, and we're going to move on with the rest of the video. But it is fun how the camera just turns in this countdown sequence. It's a very dramatic effect, and it does look really nice on camera. And I just love the animations in the top left-hand corner as well. The game has so much personality. But that's the current situation of the current Sega Saturn core as of yesterday. I'm doing this video on Friday. Core came out on Thursday, but the sound improvements are so fundamentally important to this core. Now pretty much 95% of the games are going to sound exactly like they should, and about 80% of the games look exactly like they should. But run, don't walk over to Discord, go under the Unstables Nightly channel, grab the core and start playing. See you guys next time. Bye bye.